going out into the South Side. And this is actually happening in a couple of months. And our focus is to be in sort of this utopia and work with other community-based organizations to be able to offer a holistic sort of wraparound services to the individuals that will need assistance. That is one example of how Skills has responded, along with the initiative Invest Southwest. And we want to be very cognizant that we're addressing those particular communities. So why are we doing this? If you go to the next slide, Seth, is we see some major issues in front of us, right? I talked about the wave of the unemployed. That is something that as community organizations, we need to prepare for. But we also see the inequitable economic impact that this is going to have. As I mentioned before, when you look at the statistics, you're seeing that those that are being most severely impacted by COVID are those that with a high school degree or less. You have certain Black and brown communities that are being adversely impacted. And so we're recognizing that this is something that we have to keep a close eye on. And then the access gap to jobs. As I mentioned before, the critical need of having a social network is going to be more important than it ever has been, especially in a moment where employers are going to have a significantly larger pool of candidates to select from. And they will also be moving cautiously as they try to preserve their operations to weather the storm. And the last piece that I'll note here is we do want to call out some of the barriers that we anticipate and see from the technological divide as companies start to digitize a lot of their operations, to grappling with social distancing rules and how do you take that at scale amongst these different businesses that are slowly going to open up. And the last piece I wanted to mention is we recognize that transportation has always been a barrier, but now you couple that with childcare, and that becomes an even significant barrier, especially when you're talking about certain communities throughout the city of Chicago. So that leads me to the last slide. So how can you partner with us? There's multiple ways. I think the biggest thing, right, is about creating awareness, the fact that organizations like Skills and others that you'll hear about today are here working around the clock to assist in any way that we can. I think if there's anything that you take away from here, I would say that if you're an employer, if you're a nonprofit looking to hire, please reach out to us. That first email website, biz@skillsforchicagoland.com. That's the best way to connect with us, along with the phone number that's listed there. If you're a job seeker, the best way for you to find what's available on our website for new jobs is reaching out through us through www.scfjobs.com. We are always and consistently updating with new information. So I thank you for the opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing the incredible work that you are leading at Skills. I'm going to turn it over now to Mila Skinner, who is Chief of Staff to the CEO at One Goal, to talk about access to education amidst COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you to Baumhart Center, to Loyola. Thank you all for joining today. I'm super excited to talk with you. Though you can't see me, more than anything, Emily and Seth, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to do my hair, put on real clothes, and do my makeup, because that is not something we often do now. So I'm excited about that. So I have 10 minutes. If you could go to the next slide, Seth, I'd appreciate that. I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to jump into One Goal. I feel like it would help if you all knew what we did and who we are a little bit before I jump into our response to COVID. Next slide. Thanks, Seth. Just so you all have it, a little bit about One Goal. I am, again, as mentioned, the Chief of Staff to the CEO at One Goal. We are a national education equity nonprofit. We're located in 6 states across the country. We call our offices regional offices, and we have approximately 165 people on staff. And then we also have the honor and privilege of providing partnership and support to nearly 13,000 young people who we call fellows. Those are the students we serve. We focus on college readiness, access, persistence, and completion. So college access, can you get into school? College persistence, can you stay in school? And completion, can you graduate from school? Our vision is that every young person will have an equitable opportunity to achieve their greatest post-secondary aspirations. Post-secondary meaning after high school. Next slide, please. So our mission is simple. Our mission is that we are seeking to close the degree divide in America. In a few slides, I'll share with you a little bit more about the degree divide again, just as a grounder so you know what we do. Next slide. Closing the degree divide, again, forthcoming information, is truly about equity work. We have to address the post-secondary transition at scale. That transition is what happens from the time a student graduates high school to the time that they go to college. Next slide. And so the degree divide, what is it? I'm going to read the slide in case there's any folks that are just joining us through audio and can't see screen. Today in America, only 22% of 10th graders in the bottom economic quartile complete a post-secondary degree by their 26th birthday, compared to 67% of students on the top economic quartile. What we know is that aspiration is uniform. All of our kids aspire to something. They aspire to something great. However, opportunity is not uniform. What this means is that in this country, if you have access to wealth, at minimum, you have a 45% greater opportunity to complete a post-secondary degree than someone who is lower income. And that's why we do call this a national injustice. Next slide. So to talk about our work here and how we've responded to COVID, we fuel and fulfill our mission by consistently grounding in these three distinct questions. Are more students completing a degree or a credential as a result of our program? So that's about our fellows. Are our people thriving? This is about our staff. And do we have enough resources to do our jobs? This is about our dollars. Next slide. So I'm going to give you a pre-COVID snapshot, a diagnosis of where we were against this frame of three questions. On are more students completing a degree or credential as a result of our program? Check. We have a strong model. We recognized we needed to do more work to ensure that we had greater impact on more students, specifically given the depth and breadth of the degree divide that I just referenced. Our people, also a check. We have an amazing staff. Some of those folks are on the call, so thank you for coming to hype me on. And we still needed to do some work to ensure that we are building a culture that's aligned with that staff. In terms of our dollars as well, check. We have an amazing network of donors and funders who support us, and we knew we had some headwinds coming, but we were addressing those. And so what happened because of COVID-19? So this slide that is up is my representation of what happened for us with COVID-19. To put it simple, stress, confusion, and lots of prayer. So our students were stressed about them. Where are they? What are they doing? What do they need? Our people, our staff, confused about how to care for them, what they needed, and then what it meant to switch how we operated on a dime. In terms of our resources, at the end of the day, that's just been a lot of prayer. And so we're figuring that piece out. However, we did need to recognize that this is our new reality and needed to ground ourselves. Next slide. So what we always ground in is we must remember none of us have ever done this before. So no matter what you've been involved in, you've not done this before. And so we must be kind to ourselves and others. We must give care to ourselves and others. We must provide grace to ourselves and others. And no matter what, we've got this. Next slide. So this is how we dug into the work. Are more students completing the degree divide? Again, using the same frame. This is our main priority, our students. We had to acknowledge that every situation is different. We engaged with our regional offices to see what they needed, what our students needed, where our students are, how to engage them, how to connect with them. Prior to COVID, we knew we needed to move more quickly into digital resources and tech-based solutions. And so we've had to step up our game significantly in that. What we thought would do over the next few years will not do in the future. And over the long term, we know that nothing may go back to the way it was. We don't know when our kids will end up returning to classrooms. And when they do, things may look drastically different than they do now. And so we are full speed ahead in addressing the needs that our students have in a different way, no matter where they are and what the needs are. Next slide, please. So in terms of our people, immediately we closed all of our offices, all of our regional offices. We reduced our work hours to 20 hours per week while still paying employees for the full 40 hours. And we've also provided unlimited wellness days. That's the equivalent of a sick day. We wanted to honor folks what they needed and how they needed to care for themselves and their loved ones. Our intermediate addressing of COVID has meant that we've shifted our hours to 30 hours a week, again, still paying people for 40 hours a week. We've continued the unlimited wellness days. We've centralized our communications to ensure that everyone has immediate access to the same information through the use of an intranet. We have condensed our meeting times, which is always March, to less than 60 minutes. And we welcome folks to bring their families and their loved ones, so we get a lot of beautiful faces on our meetings and calls, most specifically people with children, which we love to have. And in most cases, we are planning to align with state recommendations on when to open up, when those state recommendations privilege the health and well-being of all communities. And at the end of the day, our goal is to ensure that our staff feel cared for and supported. That is our real work. Next slide. And so on to the money, the resources. Do we have enough resources to do our job? And so by eliminating travel, of course, 6 regions means a lot of travel, we immediately decreased our spend. However, we know that's not enough. So we did a really quick assessment of our current financial position to begin to make the decisions that allow us to sustain our work long term. We've engaged donors proactively, not just to ask for additional support, but to see how we could support and partner with them. We've hosted our first all boards meeting, so that's 6 regional boards and our full national board. And we are going to be real strategic about our decision making in a way that we haven't necessarily done in the past. That means we're tightly aligning our programmatic decisions with our finances and consistently reassessing and pivoting where needed. Because we don't know what this is going to mean long term, we want to be as ready as possible. And so that's how One Goal is addressing COVID. And while all of that matters, all of those things I just outlined to you matter a great deal, and we're doing a ton of work around it, I wanted to leave you with a note from one of our staff people. And I share this because this, again, is what truly matters most in this work, making sure that we're caring for one another. So next slide. Again, for those who aren't able to see the screen, I'm just going to read this. In these days where everything feels uncertain, in the midst of all the madness, I have found there to be such a stillness that has radiated from your team. The way you have approached every decision and every bit of communication, it's just been so human. As someone who's been part of the One Goal team for almost 4 years now, I've always been proud to be in this organization, but these past few weeks have really solidified that for me. And again, that was from a One Goal staffer sent to our CEO. So again, I thank you all so much for the time. I say to each of you again, be kind, give grace, give care, and we've got this.
Myla, thank you for presenting such an incredibly moving response to COVID-19 from One Goal. I'm going to turn it over now to Nicole Gilbertson, General Manager at Chill Meditation, to talk more about employee wellness and mindfulness amidst COVID-19.
Thanks so much, Emily, and thank you to Myla and Daniel for sharing. Emily, I'll have you move to Emily or Seth, I'll have you move to the first slide. So, I'm so honored to be here with my colleagues who are doing such inspiring and exciting work. And thank you guys all for being here today. I want to share with you just a little bit about Chill Meditation, if you're not familiar with our business, why we exist and what we do, and a little bit about the relevance of mindfulness and why it's particularly applicable in the COVID era. And share with you a little bit about how COVID has impacted our business and the way that we've pivoted, and share some learnings both from our experience and our partners that will hopefully be helpful to you all. So next slide. So just to share with you a little bit about Chill, we are a modern meditation business based in downtown Chicago. We opened in April of 2017, so we actually just celebrated our 3rd anniversary last month, which looked a little different than what we had planned. But we kind of really started from the basis of a need that our founder, Laura Sage, saw an opening in the market. So at the time she was working in high finance and was interested in meditation and wanted to learn more and have a space where, she could exercise that practice and kind of build some community around it, and didn't see that existing in the marketplace. So she built a space that could help kind of manage stress and fit with a busy professional life. So just to kind of take you through a few different pieces of our business here, we started with our studio, which, as I mentioned, is based in downtown Chicago, and it's a modern meditation and massage studio. So just like you would go to any workout class to move your body, Chill is really, our studio space is designed around a workout for your mind. So you come and take instructor-led classes 7 days a week at our brick and mortar location. Chill Away is our retreat business. And Chill Ed is our teacher training program. So we actually just launched our third 100-hour certification program this past weekend. That was something that we previously hosted in our studio. We're now offering it completely digitally, but the goal around this vertical in our business is to equip people to deepen their own personal practices and then also bring meditation out into their communities and organizations. And then we also have Chill Merch, which is our private label merchandise business. And really what I want to focus on and share with you guys about today are these last two pieces here on the slide, Chill Co. and Chill Anywhere. So our original concept when we first opened was very much centered around a traditional brick and mortar model. And as we got underway and grew, we realized how much demand there was for mindfulness programming in businesses and organizations throughout the city. So from that demand, we grew a new piece of our business, which we call Chill Co., which is our corporate mindfulness business. And through this vertical, we've had the opportunity to partner with over 300 different organizations, companies like advertising agencies, law firms, hospitals, CPG companies, universities, to help create customized mindfulness programming to support their teams. So for example, we've created a certified continuing education program for attorneys that fulfills an ethics requirement. And the program specifically addresses techniques to combat mental health challenges such as depression and substance abuse that are specific to the field of law. And this area of business is exciting for us and is really kind of where we see our future. And traditionally, we've hosted these sessions either in our studio or at our clients' offices. And the demand for this type of programming and an expansion of it beyond kind of, the Chicago region led to the development of Chill Anywhere, which is our digital mindfulness platform. And I'll speak about this a little bit more in a few moments, but Chill Anywhere was originally a B2B concept that offers on-demand meditation and yoga sessions, live streaming sessions, and also customized live and pre-recorded programming for our clients. And in response to the current state, we have actually expanded this platform into a B2C offering as well. So again, more on that in a moment. I'll have you move to the next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about why mindfulness is important, especially now. So the father of modern mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn, defines mindfulness as paying attention in the present moment on purpose in a particular way without judgment. So that's kind of a lot all at once, but basically the key to mindfulness is this idea of developing your ability to keep your focus in the present moment, which is important in your normal life, but certainly in the context of a really kind of stressful and maybe isolating time. Daniel spoke about the mental and emotional toll of the current economic situation, and Mila's spoken as well about kind of the importance to take care and give grace and be empathetic in this time. And mindfulness is really a skill that helps with that. It can improve your resilience to stress. It enhances listening skills and compassion, and can develop and foster empathy, which of course in an environment where we're apart from each other but still very much working together is an important skill set. And it also of course strengthens focus, which can lead to better productivity in a time right now where there's a lot of noise. That's an essential skill. 1 in 4 Americans will experience a diagnosable mental health issue each year. And at Chill, our mission is to equip people to live less stressed and more mindful lives. And we feel really strongly that meditation and mindfulness can help folks navigate these challenges. So I'll have you move to the next slide. And I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of our response to COVID and how we've pivoted. So equanimity is something that we talk a lot about in mindfulness. It's this idea of non-attachment. So the ability to have evenness of composure in dynamic situations. And while this is something that we talk a lot about in our teaching and in the programming that we do, we have had kind of an exceptional opportunity to practice that in this environment. So we, in the middle of March, ahead of the shelter-in-place order, we actually closed our physical space in River North and immediately began offering complimentary community offerings on Instagram Live and Zoom to help support our community and offer support to other folks maybe who were new to Chill as we worked to scale up our digital offerings. And with that, we have launched our digital studio that at the end of March kind of kicked in. We offer, in this format, we offer our live stream full length classes to customers. And then we've also, our app development team has also been in tandem with these efforts, accelerating our launch of Chill Anywhere, which is our mobile app, and to expand that from a B2B offering to a B2C offering. So fortunately, this was something that we already had in the works ahead of COVID, but it's really been where we've pivoted to as, you know, one, it's an offering that we can continue to give to people in a digital format, and we know that there's a real need for this service, and we wanted to make it available to as many people as possible as soon as possible. So we're currently in beta testing for this right now, and if you know, meditation or mindfulness is something that you're interested in, you can go to chillanywhere.com and test out a trial of this content. But it's been really heartening to receive feedback from folks on how this app and the content has been supportive to them during this season. We'll take it to the next slide, please. So, you know, in all of this, I kind of wanted to share some learnings from you about share some learnings from our experience with you, and also some of the experiences of partners. If employee wellness and supporting your team is something that's kind of on your mind, I know there's lots of competing priorities right now for our attention, but if you're looking for ways to kind of take care and support your team, these are some takeaways that we've found from this season. The 2020 Edelman Trust Barometer showed that my employer is the most trusted institution in this era compared to governments, the media, NGOs, and kind of the wider business community. Teams are counting on their employers right now to create security, and businesses are being judged by how they're taking care of their employees. And I think Milo spoke to this really beautifully. You know, we have the opportunity as businesses and business communities to really support our teams in this time of isolation and high stress. So, you know, as you kind of think about your team's wellness and ways to respond, I'd like you just to keep in mind that one size doesn't fit all. So your team size, their location, experience working in a remote environment, and the dynamic of your industry right now are all factors that will impact your team. So definitely take that into consideration as you look at how best to support them. Leading by example is really important. So, you know, the adoption of wellness programs are most successful when leaders model a commitment to the approach. So, you know, whether or not you use mindfulness as your tool, you know, think about how you're leading by example for your team in this space. And also wanted to talk a little bit about the focus on employees and clients in this time. So happy teams equal happy clients, and focusing on your employees' well-being will absolutely have a trickle-down effect. Taking good care of your people will allow them to take better care of your customers. And, you know, there's a really great opportunity right now for us to create community with our teams. And most importantly, you know, take feedback from the folks that you're working with. We have found a lot of success both with us and working with our partners on an iterative process. So, you know, it's a super dynamic landscape right now. And by keeping kind of a tight community and also open channels for communication, you can ask for feedback and pivot accordingly to make sure that the offerings that you're providing your team with are relevant for what's going on in their life right now. I'll have you move to the next slide. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you guys today. I hope everyone's doing all right and, staying healthy and whole in this time, and, wishing you all well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I'm going to turn it to Jonathan McGee now, who is helping to lead our state's efforts in the response to COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you so much, everyone, for having me. It's exciting to be here on behalf of the Baumhart Center, as well as with my current and to-be scholars, and looking forward to sharing with you the state's response on how we're dealing with COVID-19. And as you all know, this has been a very challenging time for our small businesses. It's been a very challenging time for our workers. As Daniel mentioned, and we actually work with skills a lot as well with our local workforce agencies. So excited to see kind of how we have kind of threaded the needle between all of these different issues that we addressed today. So next slide, Seth. Awesome. So all of you all know the governor announced about 90 million in emergency assistance programs right as COVID hit. And specifically 3 of those programs that I'm going to touch on, as well as our workforce stuff, is the Small Business Emergency Loan Fund, our Downstate Small Stabilization Fund, our Hospitality Emergency Grant, as well as our Rapid Response Layoff Grants. Next slide. So the Downstate Stabilization Program, as you all know, Illinois is very interesting in that, our downstate communities look a lot different than Chicago. And so what we wanted to do was ensure that we had equity in mind when we thought about our relief programs, and specifically Southern Illinois and some of the more rural areas of our state who traditionally don't get as many resources just by the fact that population is not as condensed as here in the Northeast. And so what we did was ensure that we put $20 million in our federal funds to repurpose them for businesses in the rural communities, as well as communities that don't have large populations. We wanted to make sure we focused on businesses that are small, right? Actually small businesses. And I'll talk about later kind of what that means and why it's important that we looked at folks that were 50 or less. But essentially we gave grants for up to $25,000 in working capital. And one caveat of this program was we had to ensure that companies worked with their municipalities when they receive these funds. And we designed it that way because, again, it's important that communities, businesses are working hand in hand, whether it's in relief or whether it's in economic development. And so we're seeing a lot of success with this program. It's currently still open. So if you do know folks that are looking for relief, you can join, you can make sure that you send this along to them. Next slide. Our small, I think we skipped a slide. 1 second. Okay. Our Hospitality Emergency Grant Program, we partnered up with Axion, serving Illinois and Indiana. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Axion because they're a global nonprofit that really focuses on underserved communities and purpose-driven work and believe in global financial empowerment. And so we wanted to make sure that we partnered with an organization, not just a traditional lender, but a lender that was going to have equity at the forefront. And given the hospitality industry was hit the hardest by COVID-19, we wanted to make sure that we thought about how do we set up a program in a way that is going to ensure that we get these funds to folks quickly, as well as we get the funds across the state with an equity lens. And so we were able to award over $14 million in small grants to over 700 small bars and restaurants. And on average, folks received about $14,000 and hotels received about $30,000. And again, we wanted to keep the smallest folks in mind. So we even, made this even smaller to 25 employees or less. So again, that program was very successful. And again, we're looking at ways that we can continue to find other ways to support the hospitality industry. Next slide. Our Small Business Emergency Loan Program. This was another program that we stood up with Axion again. And what made this program, I think, really, really effective was, as you all know, Chicago has a variety of programs available. And at the state, we had to really think, how do we really make sure that we're spreading our resources equitably across the state? And sometimes it's tough because while Chicago has a large part of our population, we know that they have more resources. And so what we did was we wanted to make sure that we had a loan program that was specifically for businesses outside of Chicago, so those folks in the suburban areas. And if a lot of you know, we've seen a huge population shift from Chicago to the south suburbs. So again, this program was very important in bringing loan options, independent of the federal funds, to folks in the suburbs, in different parts of the state that are not in the metropolitan Chicago area, to get relief. This was a program specifically focused on, businesses that had 50 workers or less. We wanted to make sure that the loan proceeds went to payroll and keeping folks employed and keeping benefits, available to people, because we understand that that is some of the most important needs that our workers are struggling with now, or people who've been unemployed are struggling with. So we wanted to make sure that we kept that in there and we had that lens on there. Next slide. Again, Daniel talked a lot about the rapid response. And so our workforce development team quickly worked with our local workforce agencies. And so we actually get federal funds for workforce at the Department of Commerce. And one thing we wanted to look at was, we have relief programs for payroll and employees right now, but how do we help mitigate some of those other costs that we're not thinking about? We've heard the digital divide, right? And so how do we help folks acquire the technology they need so that folks can adequately work from home if you didn't have that infrastructure? How do we ensure that folks can make sure that they're cleaning on the hour and making it safe for workers? In addition to that, what if you need to convene stakeholders in a safe way? How do we kind of provide those funds for folks so that they can get it very quickly and keep people employed? And those grants are currently open through our local workforce. And so I like to look at it as a three-leg stool, as I like to say. We've provided, grants for relief. We also provide loan programs for our small businesses, and then looking at our economic development infrastructure to also make sure that we're creating jobs as well. Next slide. Next slide. So again, I talked about how we approached this crisis with an equity lens. And I think a lot of the times folks, don't necessarily look at government as the most equitable place, but I do want to credit our team at BCEO for reaching out to partners who are going to help us understand this. So again, leveraging, our local workforce areas to think about what are those costs that companies are incurring that we're not thinking about in addition to payroll, right? And some of that is, again, looking at how we're helping them adhere to social distancing so we're not contributing to higher numbers of folks in contracted cases. Again, another thing that we need to think about is how are we upskilling displaced workers from the hospitality industry? That's another thing. When folks lose their jobs, there's other jobs coming available that we can then develop them for. And so, one industry that we're seeing that's growing is manufacturing. So how are we helping folks that may not have been in manufacturing get those skills that they need so that they can continue to provide for their families? The SBA currently defines a small business as 500 employees or less. We all know that an organization of 500, right, could have a significant more amount of money than an organization that has about 5 employees. And so we wanted to make sure we focused on the very small. Those are the individuals who are really getting decimated by the COVID-19 crisis. And I think it's important to make that differentiation, because even if you're trying to apply for the federal programs, do you have the infrastructure to apply for those grants and loans? Do you have a financial person that's making sure that you have, accurate records so that you can apply? And do you have the technical assistance needed to make sure that you're successful? Again, thinking about downstate Illinois. If you all know, downstate Illinois has suffered from flooding. They suffered from a lot of different issues, whether it's related to poverty or whether it's related to just a lack of investment overall. And so we wanted to make sure that we're not forgetting about our folks that are downstate that may not be in close quarters, but also are feeling the economic impact of our stay-at-home order. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about our hospitality, how we kind of selected those grants. And we really looked at it, as a lottery, right? How do we really make sure that we can divide this in a fair way? So if more folks applied, then, that was kind of factored in. And I want to talk about how specifically myself, and others of our Office for Minority Economic Empowerment led technical assistance workshops specifically for Black and brown businesses, businesses that we know are in communities that have already been underserved and under-resourced and have not had traditional access to programs that can help them grow. And so for me, that has been personal for me. Growing up on the south side of Chicago. And so having a dedicated technical assistance approach for businesses to make sure not only that they're aware, but that they understand the process was very important. Next slide. And I just wanted to talk about lessons learned. I think that this wouldn't be helpful for you all if we didn't talk about what we could have done better. Again, I talked about this whole idea of small business and what that really means. Well, we've got a new term now, right? It's called micro business, right? These are folks of 5 employees or less. And I commend the city of Chicago for really jumping on board and putting out a program for what they would call micro businesses. So when you think about chains and you think about bigger business, some of them may have less than 500 employees, but are they dealing with the issues, right, that micro businesses are dealing with? Again, thinking about dedicated resources for minority-owned businesses, exclusive resources that, these communities can apply for and not have to compete across the board with everyone else who's also getting hit hard by COVID-19. So again, technical assistance is one thing, but I think, the bigger thing is how do we make sure we pull a pot of money for folks of color and folks that are being hit by this virus? I say this all the time to my Baumhart Scholar colleagues. I say this, at the workplace, and I say this to my friends and family. We need better coordination, communication, and collaboration across state agencies, and quite frankly, across the nonprofit, private, and public sectors. I love the fact that I've seen so many companies stand up COVID-19 response funds and so many philanthropies stand up COVID-19 response funds, but a lot of times I found myself scouring Google or seeing it come across my social media platform when you think about it in some form or fashion, we should be the first to know so that we're making sure we're getting out those resources and we're informing those funds and we're informing those processes. And last but not least, if you don't have a phone or a computer and your local library is not open, how do you even apply for anything at all? And I think that the digital divide and COVID-19 has highlighted this is probably going to be our most challenging obstacle that we face as we start to think about, as Emily would say, what our new normal looks like. Last slide. Again, I wanted to just share some success stories and benchmarks for you all to take away. Again, we required that local units of government and companies work hand in hand around relief as opposed to sending the relief directly to them. I think it's important to make sure that communities are engaged. The other piece is collaborating with Axion, like I said, a global nonprofit that's committed to creating a financially inclusive world. And we made sure that they helped us put that equity lens on the programs that we stood up. We have a call center. So a lot of folks that I've heard of say, I can't get in touch with certain folks. We stood up a call center 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We wanted to make sure we was as accessible as possible because, the Illinoisan people are our customers, and that's how we look at it. We did create public-private partners. Google has helped us stand up a chatbot on our website. If you go to our website right now, you're going to see our small business assistant who's going to come and answer maybe some of those preliminary questions before you need to reach out to someone. Another company, Bring Now, what we noticed was a lot of restaurants did not have the ability to start to do takeout and do delivery and weren't set up to do Uber Eats and DoorDash. And so, what Bring Now did was help them start to ramp that up and help them figure out how to put those systems in place so that they can make sure money is coming through the door. And last but not least, Venturize is an online resource hub, much like what I talked about earlier. It's an area for folks, businesses to communicate, collaborate, and coordinate around how they scale up, specifically in a time now where resources are slim. It has our small business development centers there, as well as other resources across the state. And so we again wanted to make sure that we were practicing what we preached in terms of collaboration. And so wanted to kind of talk to you all about what we did well and some lessons learned, as well as how we're responding currently to the COVID-19 crisis. So I hope that was helpful. And with that said, I'll turn it back over to Emily. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing, and a huge thanks to all of the scholars for talking about their leadership in response to COVID-19. I want to be conscious of everyone's time, but I'm hoping to ask our panelists one last question and to get a response from each of you on this. So all of you have shared really incredible lessons learned amidst this moment, but can you share with this group, what is one thing that you hope we take into the future after COVID-19? How can we begin to imagine a more equitable world when we emerge from this pandemic? And Daniel, would you mind starting us off with your answer?
I apologize. I was hoping you can repeat that. Sorry, my son jumped in and was asking me something.
Absolutely, no problem. So all of you have shared incredible lessons that you've learned amidst this moment, but what is one thing that you hope we take into the future after COVID-19? And how can we imagine a more equitable world when we emerge from this pandemic?
I mean, I think to keep it brief, my comment on that is prior to COVID, as a city, as a state, we were starting to make some strides as it relates to certain populations that have struggled to find employment, such as returning citizens, opportunity, or our more at-risk youth. And the concerns that I have is in the wake of COVID, when you have such a large supply of candidates out there, what's going to happen to them, right? Where employers are, if anything, they're trying to make sure that they're preserving cash, their operations to weather this storm. And so I think that's a concern that I have in the wake of COVID. And I do hope that every employer, every community organization, as well as philanthropy, truly is now putting diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront alongside health when they're thinking about how they bring people back into their respective workforces.
Amazing. And Mila, I'll turn it to you now.
Sure, thank you. So I would say I think about any type of global incident, or specifically for our country, 9/11 as an example, now COVID. During those times, we lean in, we love on each other, we care for one another, and more importantly, we identify the unique needs of people. And so I would hope that that this crisis allows us to continue to do that and not to just look at this as a moment in time. And so equity work, social justice work is about the unique needs of individuals and communities, and the work that Jonathan just spoke about, that Daniel spoke about in particular. I don't want us to let go of recognizing those unique needs when things go back to whatever our new normal would be.
Amazing. Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there was a question in the chat box as well too about kind of if our mission and vision has shifted at all. It's, I think for us, reinforced the need for the service that we offer, and shown kind of how important mindfulness and personal well-being is in a context, especially, like this one. And I think going forward, I'm hopeful that that's something that, our partners will continue to value. I think, kind of the wider consciousness around the importance of mental and emotional well-being, especially in such a stressful and difficult time, that's something that, we don't lose sight of going forward, and that people will continue to find that a helpful and useful resource for themselves as we navigate, the current situation, also moving forward from it, which there will probably, there's likely to be difficulties and stress in that as well too.
Thank you. And Jonathan, we will end with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Well, as you all know, I think we all need to continue to work together to share resources. Again, we don't know what we don't know. And I think that works across the board. So when you hear about, and the great part about, I think the one great part about the fact that we're all digital is that we can share these things relatively quickly. So if you hear about, a fund or a COVID response relief program or a loan program, please make sure that you're sharing it both with us and sharing it with your neighbors, as well as people in your organization, because I just think that what happens is we're in silos and stovepipes, and that even happens, right now, even in the digital world. So I think ways that we can continue to move through this crisis together starts with information sharing. It starts with compassion and knowing that There are folks working as hard as we can to make sure we're getting resources out to people. But the piece that I really want to touch on is how do we continue to build, an equitable world after this? And what can we do to ensure that those that are most underserved, those that are most under-resourced, and the individuals who were not ahead before COVID-19 and now are further behind as a result of this pandemic can reach parity. And I think that number one starts with everyone that's on this call. It starts with us thinking about how do we make every decision with an equity lens on it, much like I talked about the department doing, but we can't do it alone. And I think that what's great about what I've seen with nonprofit organizations is they've been reaching out to us about how they can help. But I want to see that from the private sector as well. I want to see it from the philanthropic sector. So how do we, again, continue to make sure that we're prepared so that when the next potential global pandemic or issue hits, that we're not in kind of scramble mode, but we're actually ready and we're deploying these resources right away. We've got the jobs prepared, and we're ready to deal with the moment. And so again, I just appreciate everything that everyone's doing here, and whatever we can do at the state and whatever we can do at the Baumhart Center, I know we're happy to do so. So thanks so much, Emily.
Great, and a huge thanks again to all of the scholars. All of you have truly been at the forefront of this work, so thank you for everything that you are doing every day right now to meet this moment. And for all of our participants, thanks for being a part of this important conversation. And as Mila shared, I hope that we can all be kind to one another, give grace, and give care. Thanks everyone for joining.